You're tuned in to RX Radio.
Do you remember your first time training in like a structured environment, like with a trainer, with a coach?
Yeah. I got a personal trainer when I was maybe 15.
Okay.
I was with the distinct purpose of training for hockey. Like we got, I don't know, dry land. Do they even use that word anymore? Was that a, I guess
Dry
it's such
land?
a hockey. If you grew up playing hockey in Canada, you'll remember dry land training, which is what they called like run because you played on ice.
Yeah.
So I just always, it's funny. I said that and I got the same look from a football player a couple weeks ago. They're like, what? Like versus wetland training? Like, yeah, right. You're running around in marshes. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? So if you grow up playing hockey, you will know the concept of dry land, which is essentially like when you're a kid, it's, you play minor like rep hockey or travel hockey, double A, triple A hockey in Canada. Like it's good. Like kids I played with play in the NHL. Like it's probably the best minor hockey in the world. Alberta is probably up there as well. So like you got 15-year-old kids who are already talking about going to the NHL. And so like there's the training off ice dry land training habits of junior A teams, NHL teams that percolates in just like any sport, I suppose. Like I'm sure wrestling has its like how to train kids and development and all that. But when we were kids 20 years ago, 30 years ago, whatever the fuck, 25 years ago, it was like you just kind of ran. Yeah. And that was it. It was like, I don't know, we're just gonna go for, so our hockey team would meet up in the summer and we just go for runs. And I was terrible. I had no work capacity. It was dog shit. And then over time, I'm better and better and better. And then it came to the point where it's like, all right, we probably need to get something specific. So yeah, I remember getting a personal trainer at Good Life Fitness. Obviously, my parents paid for it, with the hopes of that I would get better at hockey and I would make like a junior team. And yeah, walking in first day, some guys like taking the reins. And before it was just like bro arm workouts with Lundy in the fucking high school gym. But yeah, that was fuck, dude. I don't think about that often, but that was probably like a turning point of being on like the other side of it.
Yeah, I think that's pretty crazy because I honestly can't say that I've ever hired a personal trainer or worked one-on-one with a personal trainer. But my introduction into more structured training, because I grew up, like we always had workout equipment at home, and like I would work out with my dad and my brother and we'd get competitive and stuff with it. But it was right around the same time. It was when I was transitioning from junior high wrestling into high school wrestling. So I think over the summer I was 13 years old. And there was just this group of wrestlers that I trained with. They were all way better than I was, which is who you want to be training with, by the way. But we worked out with he was the best of the group, state champion, went D1, wrestled 4 years D1 college, All-American. But his dad kind of had just this pack of kids that he would train. And I ended up getting accepted into the pack of kids. And looking back at it, thinking back, it was definitely like a launching point in my understanding of fitness and training and like getting into learning more and educating myself on training. But we would just go through, it was Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We do it like after school, after practice, whatever. And it was the same workout every single day. It was full body. We're there for like 2.5 hours. It would start with bench press. So we do like barbell bench press. We'd like work up to a heavy single every single time and like pyramid back down like an AMRAP set. And then we do a bunch of shoulder shit like laterals, overhead press, like shoulder machines, pull-ups. We'd always do pull-ups and weighted pull-ups every single day. And then it would go into like bis and tris. And then it would be time for lower body. I think we'd alternate between squat and deadlift and then like walking lunges and power cleans. And it was just this insane workout. There was like literally everything you could do, and you go as hard as you can on literally everything. And it fucked me up, as would fuck anyone up. And I ended up like hurting my SI joint doing that. So there was this period of time where like I couldn't really train. I couldn't train with them, and then I took some time off. And like in that time, I'm like, well, this is fucking dumb. So I'm going to learn as much as I can about training. so I could like kind of rehab my back, but also like not have this happen again. And because of that experience, I like started to learn, and I like deviated away from training in that situation and started to train myself essentially. And that's kind of why I was thinking of like what we'll get into talking about today is like when do you need a coach? When do you need a trainer? And like whether that's someone that's Gen Pop, whether that's someone that's trying to get into training to excel at sport, which is kind of how both of us got into. And I think a lot of people that end up being career personal trainers, that's kind of how they get into it in more of a formal setting like that. Um, but that's kind of the thing that like going from all right, being introduced to training, this is training, getting hurt, not being able to train, and then it forced me to learn and kind of adapt to be like, all right, so like what do I need to do so that this doesn't happen again? And it allowed me to use myself to experiment on. And I think that's like the main thing for me that's carried throughout my entire training career is like, all right, if I'm going to do this for other people, like I better have some sort of understanding around what I'm asking them to do, how their body's going to react, like what it feels like to do that, so that I can accurately assign exercises, volume, and intensity, and kind of gives people some idea of what they should be expecting from that. And that's like literally my entire training career. It's like, all right, I'm gonna eat the dog food before I feed it to them, and I'm gonna see how this feels. And if it's a little bit too fucked, then I'll dial it back. If it's a little bit easy, like I know how to properly adjust things just because of like using myself to experiment with that stuff.
Yeah, I think to the big picture question of like who needs a coach or when to get a coach and when to not, I think it comes down to at first what will drive long-term adherence, right? So I think with you, what drove long in your mind, what would drive long-term adherence is actually moving away from a coach, right? Like I want to be adherent to training. So in your situation, you ran into a negative outcome, and this is really common. But this is really common, especially honestly with the intersection of people who look for information through the podcast space who might not be in the industry, who are on, who are enthusiasts, who want to be in shape, who like resistance training, who like learning by podcast or YouTube or both about fitness and how to optimize sort of their approach. Is sometimes people are steered away from trainers because of a bad experience. And that's led them down the road of like, okay, there's something that trainer didn't know that I need to know personally and take some responsibility. So I think the first like really high level question to get an answer is at what result of this will leave me training long term, right? So there's some people who very quickly arrive at I need a trainer because unless someone has my money, I'm not going to the fucking gym, right? So that's a pretty easy turnkey. Like, oh, you don't have accountability, you don't have the inspiration or the discipline or the motivation. Well, what if someone just had your money and you had to go see him to get the value that you paid for, right? Like, today is kind of screwing over future you's self to force them to go to the gym because that future you is only going to be concerned about the money that some trainer has, and you're going to go reap the benefit of what you paid for, and it hopes to improve your health or whatever it is you're working towards. So I think that's like bucket number one. Do I hire a coach? Do I not hire a coach? Depends. Which of those results will have you going to the gym more often for longer? Like which two lives, if you split this quantum result and you let A and B go test against each other for the rest of your life, which one of those decisions ultimately makes you healthier long term? I think that's like a pretty safe first split in the road. But at some point, people run into either having a coach and maybe no longer needing it, or not having a coach up until a certain point and needing it, right? You run into a separate fork in the road. So if you go the route of, an autodidact, self-taught expert, and you enjoy the process of absorbing information and then trying it on yourself, there will ultimately be a point where I think a coach is beneficial. And then on the flip side of that, if you are someone who sort of grows up in captivity and you learn to train under the guise of another person, under the watchful eye of a trainer or a coach, but you take to it, right? You have an affinity for it. You learn to like it. You see results. And then I think there's a point there for you to break free and do it on your own, right? So I guess the real question then is, when for someone who doesn't train or with a trainer, when should they decide to then maybe, get some guidance? What are some signs along that road to be like, hey, I'm going to this is pointing you towards getting someone to help facilitate your training, or someone who has sort of come up in their training journey, if you will, with a trainer. What are some signs pointing you to a more independent road where you're not just going to be spoon fed your information and how you're going to train and diet and things like that? So I think that's sort of like the next impasse. So, I mean, what's your take on people who start with a trainer? Because I think this is actually probably more common, of people who start lifting weights, understand their limitation, understand, that there is so much to learn, especially this day and age, and go, you know what, I'm busy, I got kids, I work fucking 60 hours a week. I'm just going to pay someone to do all the thinking for me. What are some key indicators for you where, okay, you've worked with a trainer for a few years, should you step out on your own?
Yeah. I think that's a really good conversation to have, because what I've seen both in my training career and in, I guess you could mean that both ways, but me training people and me training myself, is it should be kind of cyclical, right? Is you start off training, and I think there's a benefit to not having a trainer at first, or not having structure to it at first, because you start to understand that, okay, you know what you know, or you know what you at least believed walking into the gym, but then you start to understand that there's a lot more that you don't know, right? And it's like the known unknowns versus the unknown unknowns. And as you start to understand that there's more things that you don't know than maybe what you were originally thought, so you're uncovering some of the known unknowns as you get into the gym, then maybe that's a place where you start to feel a bit overwhelmed in your ability to do this effectively, or accomplish your goals on your own. So maybe that's the thing that gets you to think, all right, I need help with this. So then you start working with a trainer, and there's different levels of trainers, of course, and different kind of scenarios in which you work with the trainer. But that trainer then is kind of a means of education, if you let it be, right? There's some people that don't want that, and they just want to kind of maintain status quo, go to the gym, like do their 5 minutes on the treadmill, do their full body workout 3 times a week, and then go home. Like, cool, all right, that's fine. Your goal is, I don't know, to be healthy, or feel like you're healthy, or like whatever, play with your kids. Cool. But for someone like yourself or myself, that we got into this training for sport and kind of chased it as far as we could down that route of sport performance, we're like, what are the furthest extents that training can take us to? It is a cycle of like, all right, I'm understanding that I don't really know what the fuck I'm doing. So I'm going to seek someone out to teach me more than I currently know. And there's going to be a ceiling to that relationship. There's going to get to this point. I think any trainer that's worked with Gen Pop clients, you've gotten to this point where like there's this really cool momentum that you have with clients, and you're working and they're seeing progress, and they're doing really good. They're asking good questions. They're learning. They're executing. And then it gets to a point almost where it's like you guys are on autopilot. Like they come in, they know the warm up, they go through, they like know their weights, they like have some sort of intelligent input around if they should go up, if they should stay at the same weight, or like based off of like auto regulation of how they're feeling on that day. Like, you know what, I'm gonna keep it light today, and maybe we'll push it on, the leg press as opposed to the walking lunges, and like they start to have some sort of valuable feedback, and there's some sort of independent thinking around what they're doing, and that relationship is kind of, there's just a lull in it, right? There's almost a ceiling to progress, whether it's you as the trainer in like what you can help them with, or them as a client in what you need the trainer for. So I think that becomes a point now where you can almost release that client, or if you're on the client side of this, is you can separate yourself from that trainer, and you can put yourself back into an environment to start to understand what you don't know again, because you know as much as you've been taught, but you've been kept in an environment where the unknown unknowns are controlled for you. You don't have to deal with those variables. So once you get to that point, it's kind of a plateau of progress in terms of what you've been exposed to. Now you can kind of be released back into the wild again. And there's this point where you can experiment a little bit and do different things that maybe you've seen other people doing, or you've seen on the internet or whatever. You start to expose yourself to different styles of training and different ideas, because working with a singular trainer, or in like a singular system, whether it's like high school strength and conditioning, college strength and conditioning, you'll get exposed to the values of the person that's delivering that training to you, which is great. And hopefully it's a good trainer and they have a good understanding. and they're things that are valuable. But even if it is a good trainer, you're only getting exposed to a very small portion of what's out there. Like maybe you grow up, like I grew up, a lot of it was kind of powerlifting and bodybuilding based, like strength training, which I think is how a lot of people get exposed to it, at least in our era. That's how a lot of people got exposed to it. And then you start to branch off and be like, all right, what different modalities are there? Like for me, I got into like CrossFit after that. I got into, like, I was even doing more endurance stuff at a certain point. Um, yeah, don't do that. But but I needed after I got to that point to kind of allow myself to be exposed to different things so I could learn, like, oh shit, like I thought running was just one foot in front of the other. Like there's nuance to this. Like there's technique to running. There's periodization to running. And I start to understand that there's things that I don't know about these things that I perceive to be very simple, but I never really was exposed to. So then you get to that point where now there's even more of these unknown unknowns, and you're learning that there's more known unknowns, and hopefully at that point you're also understanding that because of that there's probably even more unknown unknowns than you even realize, and that starts to get you to seek out maybe a different trainer or someone that specializes in something else, and then it starts to become this cycle. And that's kind of how I've gotten to this place in my career. Like I've I never know the word here. There's seeking out something, but when you do it past tense, I didn't suck out.
Sought.
Yeah, I sought. I sought. I didn't suck out anything.
How did you get here?
I seeked.
You sought.
Sought. Yes, my brain is a terrible place to live in. It's fucking terrible in here.
I live next door, and I can attest to that.
You're like, what the fuck's going on the other side of that wall?
Holy shit, keep it down over there with your sucking or soughting. Jesus. I'm going to have to explain that to my neighbors now. Fuck's sakes. Jesus. Okay, as you were saying, past tense.
Past tense, I sought out education. Almost once you have an understanding of training, I look at coaching as mentoring, right? I've sought out information from high level coaches in the areas in which I was interested. Like even talking about running, it's something that I don't like to talk about because running's kind of dumb.
Sucks.
But running sucks. Like the reason I train is so I don't have to run from anything. And even where training ends, I have weapons, so fuck off. I'm not running from shit. But like there was a point where I worked with a high level running coach to understand pacing and like tempos and splits and running progression. There's times where I worked with some of the best Olympic weightlifting coaches in the country. Like both of the coaches I worked with have sent athletes to the Olympics. They've coached at the Olympics. So it's like there's a point where even though I was very competent in training as a general term, there's these niches of training in which I wanted to get more exposure to. So I hired a coach that did this at the highest level so that I could learn their processes, like how they think about training, what they look for, like technical improvement, periodization, like some of the more nuanced things about training that you don't really get when you just have a one-on-one personal trainer that they're going to design the session, they're going to design the overall periodization or program for you. So you just kind of walk in the gym and all you're really focused on is executing on that day.
Yeah, I think there's a flip side to this use case that I think may be useful for most of the audience to consider, which I'm assuming most of the audience is going to be coaches, is when you have a client for a long period of time. Like what I like about what we do for a living technically, like as chiropractors, is, when you're done school, there's this language of going into practice, right? And you can say what you want about chiropractors. I don't know. Sure. I probably agree with 99% of like the criticism, but I do like the idea that it is a profession that when you're done, like law or, medicine or whatever, it's like you go into practice. And I think, you described kind of the promised land for a lot of trainers, I think, in their brain of like getting a whole roster of clients who are autonomous, and you just kind of go in and, just dab them up and do whatever. And you kind of built up this person to this point where they're self-serving and you're getting paid to be there. And I think that if we look at the profession of coaching and training as a practice, you see that as stagnation. You see that as a negative, right? Having someone on your roster that is at that point and still taking up an hour time slot where you could be working with someone who poses a new challenge, right? And those challenges are boundless. Those challenges could be, movement problem solving. They could be overcoming past injuries. They could be overcoming particular preferences around training. And then not even to mention the behavioral and interpersonal side of, communication and habits and things like that, which those are quite literally endless combinations of the types of people that you could train. So, and it intersects with an issue that I see good trainers who aren't great trainers, a problem that they have in their business. Good trainers have a roster of autonomous people, right? But they're never great for a few reasons. One, you get, and this is this is very overt. This is very like real life. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. You take someone from, a novice into an intermediate towards advanced, someone who's autonomous in the gym, not going to hurt themselves, could probably, take what you've imparted on them and go ahead with it. But you've got a good relationship with them. They find it fun. They have their time slot. They're in a routine now. And you've optimized for that client. But when you optimization and adaptability exist on a spectrum, right? The more adaptable I am, the less I'm worried about optimization. Optimization is finite, right? And the more adaptable I am, the less I have room to optimize, right? We're always trying to move from, and look, adaptability has a particular definition in this space that makes this analogy a little bit muddy. So, and as does optimization. But think of like, optimization is getting a lot of press. People are posting about this idea a lot. It gets a lot of flack. But I think of optimization as, look, we've turned over all of the big rocks and now we're at the small rocks. That's really what optimization is. Adaptation is really focusing on the big rocks. Now, there's a fragility that comes with hyper optimization. We can think of this behaviorally is probably a really good way to draw this conclusion, right? Like, I like to tend, or not like to, my lifestyle leads me to being consistently adaptable, right? The scenarios I'm in, the airplanes, the hotel rooms, like I need to be able to adapt, right? I need to adapt my training almost on a daily basis. I need to be able to adapt my nutrition, in different settings where I don't have a routine. I personally enjoy that. That's the adaptability has allowed me consistency, but I know I've left a lot on the table, right? One of the questions that I'll get posed to me is like, man, if you just stayed in one place for a year, like how big could you be or how strong could you be? And I was like, yeah, I have no idea. Like how much have I left on the table from eating, frozen bagged chicken wraps made with an iron on a countertop in a hotel room, as opposed to like having a fucking meal prep fridge full of meals. It's like, I get that, but I haven't missed a session ever.
I'll vouch for it.
Ever. Like, hey, we got that exam tomorrow, right? Yeah. Oh, so what are you training? I'm going to go do snatches. All right. I'm going to go do deadlifts. Good luck on that stupid fucking exam tomorrow. Like, but so there's, and I think given my scenario that I'm better off physically, health-wise, strength-wise, body composition-wise, because I'm hyper tuned at adapting to scenarios where other people aren't, right? People are like, oh, like how do you, like no sleep or yeah, whatever. I don't know. Just love to train and go do it. And it's not a badge of honor. It's a weighing of scales. It's a precondition, right? Like when we're looking at as a profession of training and going into practice as a trainer, which I don't think people see it that way. People work as a trainer. It's like, no, you practice. It's a profession. You want to be treated as a professional? Treat your job like a profession. Like it's fucking, you start there. You're not optimizing your time. You're becoming very fragile as a provider because you're not exposing yourself to varied situations that are going to force you to adapt. And I think one of the issues that people run into is like, there's this loyalty factor because so much of what we do is interpersonal. So like, tell me if this sounds familiar to anyone listening. you've trained this person, they become really good at training. You have a roster full of people who just kind of show up very turnkey. They know how to, load the plates and do the math and do whatever. And they make, fairly consistent progress. You know a lot about their lives. And now you're stuck. Do I go digital? I can't possibly charge these people more. I don't have any more hours in a week. I have somewhat of a wait list. And your wait list is full of opportunities to practice, right? And this is where I think there's a fork in the road for the coach to be like, hey, look, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to up my rates considerably because I've been able to take all of these different scenarios that I have in my client roster and take them to a point of autonomy. And I'm going to explain this to them that I think it's best for their continued progress to step out of, step out of the Shire, to use a Lord of the Rings analogy, and go out and experience the training world, right? Go to a commercial gym at 5 p.m. where you're vying for a squat rack, or you have to start making some of these decisions, right? Like we create this walled garden of a curated training experience for our clients that could immediately change the second that you no longer have the personal trainer velvet rope in whatever gym you're training at, right? You step out of the back room of Sundown and you put someone in, the American Barbell on Duane Avenue. You're in a different environment. Environment breeds adaptation. Now we go back from, how do I optimize my snatch to, oh, wait, like all of the racks are taken. Yeah. What do I do now? How do I adapt? And I think it's useful, and it's useful for every single part of the development outside of just the body. Now they go from interacting with just solely you. And a lot of times people will communicate through you. Someone will come in and they'll look at you and be like, get this fucking jabroni out of here, will you? So you're a bouncer now. You're the bouncer and the trainer and the towel getter. And then all of a sudden you're in a new environment. So I think if you have genuinely, one, you need to have a hunger to get better as a coach and understand that what you do is a practice, that you should be pushing yourself towards these scenarios where you have opportunities to grow. And two, if you really like your job and you really like your clients, know what's best for them is on the outside of that walled garden, right? Read the story of Abraham. God tells Abraham to get the fuck out of the house. And Abraham's 80 years old. Abraham, world, go after it. And he's like, I'm 80. He's like, yeah, I don't care. That's a crazy story. But same thing, right? Like when you look at clients and trainers, it's like, if you care about the development of your clients, understand, it's no different than our parents. Well, maybe not our parents, but parents like our parents. We're because our parents are 18, get the fuck out of here. Where most people's parents are like, no, stay at home. You can go to university here. And it's like, dude, I know fucking 34-year-old men that don't know how to make a sandwich. Dog, right? Get the fuck out of the basement, Abraham. Time to go. If you care about the development of your clients across all measures of health, I think it is useful at a certain time. And there's a lot of ways strategically where you can do it. You can put them on some, and I know people who've done this, put them on some digital, I write the program type sort of weaning off process. But I see not only from a trainer or a client perspective, a lot of stifling of potential growth, but from a trainer business, personal, professional development perspective, one of the things I see most often is coaches who just hit it in cruise control. Mm-hmm. Look, if you're in your mid, early 30s and you have a full client roster and people who like you, and you're just good riding it out, you know who those people, in 10 years, you're going to have a ponytail, and that's not okay. And you're going to be a grown man with a ponytail. So, because you don't got to look professional anymore. You don't have to be presentable. Your people don't care. They're your people, right? It's I think always having to contest with the open market is massively beneficial to honing your skills in the short and long term, right? So, we talked about General Electric. General Electric, famously, their old CEO used to purge the bottom 20% of the company. Every year, 20% of the people got fired, and there's an overturn, right? You need to do that in yourself. There are tribes in Western Canada native tribes in Western Canada that at the end of every year, the leader of the tribe, the chief of the tribe, he would give away all of his things. And he would basically be stripped naked and put in front of everyone and being like, hey, how'd you fuck up as a leader this year? And it's your clients are never going to do that for you. So you're never going to get served. And people build they end up being in the garden with them, and there's no development, there's no growth, right? And I think that's something where we see that a little bit in level 3, right? And because this now brings up the conversation of like, when do coaches need coaches? I think this is a really good intersection of like, hey, you've run a certain playbook, you've been nothing but surrounded by confirmation bias, you are the autocrat at the top of the pyramid. You need to go out, be stripped naked, give out all your shit, and now let someone else take control, right? And I think that's such a useful, it's market research for yourself as a product, right? You being a client, because like there's ways people communicate that. Like I trained with my buddy Satish today at Fit Squat. He has a completely different method of training. It was wild. It was just, but I know what I'm trying to get out of this, right? I have a particular way I think about training. I have a particular style of training that works for me. I have some dents in the fender, but like the way this dude could communicate, I was like, yo, this guy's he's getting me, someone who has, a hardened-ish bias way of thinking about training. He's communicating his way so well to me that I'm going through his workout with not really a care in my mind. And I was like, that's an element, an aspect of what we do that you will never shine, that you can't shine light on, right? Like it's like an emperor's new clothes type situation. It's like at a certain point, you need to realize that you're completely naked, right? So I think there's so much value at that intersection of like, hey, I have a full client roster. What do? Burn it down. Burn it down, and you will rebuild better.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because in terms of just advancing in your career, complacency should be the enemy always, right? If you get complacent in what you're doing, then there's no value to be added to the service that you're providing. So like, yeah, you can raise your rates a nominal amount year over year, make a little bit more money, keep up with inflation, whatever, but you're not progressing your business at all if that's what you're trying to do. So like if you think of like I'm here in the Silicon Valley, it's very prevalent here is that people that can solve more complex problems make more money, period. Right? If I know how to get you to factory reset your iPhone, then I can get a job at the Apple store and I can help you factory reset your iPhone. But if I know how to reprogram an app on the iPhone, then Apple hires me to be the guy that reprograms the app for the new iOS. And one of those guys getting paid a whole lot more to do probably a whole lot less than the other guy. And that kind of should be the way that you think of your career over time, is you want to add value to your skill set so that you can solve more complex problems. Maybe they're more niche and there's not many people that are going to be seeking you out, but those problems become more and more valuable. And that's like the progression for a personal trainer. It should be like that. It should, like, you should start out and you have to learn everything. Like, you need to first learn how to get someone that's way overweight to come back and see you for months at a time and change their diet so that they can start to lose weight and they can feel better and they can look better and they see progress in that way. Like, cool. That's like, if you can't do that as a trainer, like, get a different profession. But you start there and you learn how to solve the easy problems. And then over time, like, okay, maybe that's your thing, is you start solving the easy problems. And that's like the stuff you'll see Instagram ads about, or like even on like mainstream like TV, you'll see ads about weight loss and things like that, because it's a very easy problem to solve. But that's like the open mouth of the funnel. That's the problem that anyone that gets into fitness, barrier of entry, that's going to be how most people find their way into fitness. It's like, I want to feel better. I want to look better. I want to make changes with my body. I want to be healthier. Cool. Like, learn how to do that. But then you start to get that complacency, and like, that's it. There's pretty fast turnover, because if that's where it levels out, like, that person gets into a place where they've lost 20 pounds. They're kind of on autopilot, cruise control. Like, it's same thing, rinse, repeat. And then they're going to top out at a certain point. Or maybe it's the other side. They get injured and it's a problem that you don't know how to solve, and you lose that client. They don't come back and they don't see progress anymore. Okay, well, how can we reinvest? How can we start to learn? What's the next thing? Like, after I get someone off of the couch, moving, they feel good, they have some sort of athletic base. Like, what's the next thing? Do I learn how to really understand strength training? Do they have strength goals? Do I need to learn how to understand how to make them more athletic so they can go play tennis with their friends, or like whatever they want to do on the weekend? Is it more specialization towards like rehab or injury based training? Like, Do you want to be the guy that works with people that has knee pain? There's a lot more money in solving the knee pain problem than the weight loss problem, because they're going to be a lot more convicted clients. They're going to be people that they have a very finite goal that they're very motivated to solve. So that's going to be a higher value client than someone that's, I'm going to show up every now and then. Like when I see some progress, I'll probably fall off. But as you go further and further, and like you mentioned, the level 3, like kind of the pinnacle of training is training professional athletes. Like if you can get to the point where you're training professional athletes, like you're doing rehab, you're doing like the health stuff is taken care of, but maybe it's not. Like you need to understand like how to identify if is this person just coming in like dehydrated and hungover and they're eating like fast food in between sessions. It's like that's probably a conversation that you've had 1,000 times over if you've kind of climbed the ladder and gotten to this point in athletics. So it's as you go through, it's you want to be able to add more value to the service that you offer because you've seen all these things. You've worked through these. You've done a factory reset on the iPhone. You've learned coding in the background. Like you applied for the internship. You did an IT job. You worked your way up, and now you can code the app because you understand how to add value, and that the more complex the problems are, the more reward there's going to be for solving them. And like, yes, I'm speaking monetarily here, but also like in terms of just rewarding practice, like you enjoying what you're doing. There's not much enjoyment in being in cruise control and like feeling stuck and feeling like you're a slave to your clientele and like you have to work like 50, 60 hours a week in person just to maintain the quality of life that you've kind of found for yourself. And what I've seen to be probably over the last 5 years or so, a very successful model is kind of what you were saying is like, okay, you get these, you have a skill set, you get these people to a point where maybe they're on autopilot. It's just rinse, repeat. And then maybe that's the point where you release them into the wild, where instead of me fighting for a squat rack, you're fighting for that squat rack. And you have to go in the gym and you need to understand, like, hey, I've been protecting you from all of these variables. Like, I've been stealing squat racks and weights and like fucking other people off for you. And now you have to go into the gym after work and it's a jungle in there. And you need to figure out, okay, I can't squat today. So what am I going to do for my workout? Am I going to wait here till 7 p.m.? Or am I just going to do some lunges and leg press and get on with my life? And that can kind of be that cycle where you start in person, you get people to the point where it's sustainable, they're consistent with what they're doing, they understand how to execute on it. Then maybe you put them on like an online program and they do that remote, and then maybe their goals change and you continue to add value and solve more complex problems. And then you could take them like, hey, I know we were doing strength training, but how about we do, I don't know, we switch to powerlifting or Olympic lifting, or we do more athletic based training, or we add running on the weekends. And you can start to channel their progress towards these things in which maybe you're special. And I see this all the time is coaches will start to specialize in something and then all their clients will start to specialize in that too. Cause it's like,
Oh,
yeah, they'll be like, hey, like I've been working on this. Do you want to try it? And like, people, if they like you and they're enjoying their training, they don't really give a fuck. Like not many people that hire a trainer have very specific goals. So it's like, yeah, that sounds fun. Like it's different. We've been doing this for a while. Let's try that new thing. Let's see if we can increase my vertical jump, or let's add a power clean in. And it gives people kind of a rabbit to chase in that kind of their pursuit of whatever their fitness goals are. But that starts with learning and being able to solve more complex problems, because especially if you were working with someone remote, like a lot of coaches are now, is okay, you have less tools, you have less feedback mechanisms to be able to solve that problem. So you need to understand how to solve it really well, and then you need to have the proper data collection to be able to give them the proper feedback to now continue to have progress in that way. So so that's kind of how I look at it. Is like, if you find yourself being complacent in what you're doing, maybe it's time to hire a coach that you can use as a mentor, even if you are a coach, and then you can learn from them and then start to trickle that down. And that's better retention. That's adding more value to your services because you're problem solving in different ways. And you can almost create problems for your clients to solve. It's like, hey, like I noticed that like we're kind of topping out at the back squat. Why don't we do a little bit more power training in the meantime, and then we'll come back to this. And and it allows you just a different lens to look at different scenarios, when maybe if all you ever knew was like bodybuilding, strength bias bodybuilding training, it's like, all right, we topped out our back squats. Let's go back to hack squat again. And it just gives you more tools to solve more problems with more clients.
I think there's 4 interpersonal skills maybe even borderlining on virtues that trainers need to always be mindful of. Passion, trust, respect, and empathy. If you get to a point where you're on autopilot, you talked about reward, and I think of the word fulfillment. There's nothing fulfilling about going in and the day going exactly how I thought it was going to go, because it would have gone that way devoid of me being there, right? So I think if you got to a point where you're on autopilot, you feel this, you need to shake things up, because you need to find passion for what you do again. And the reason you need passion as a trainer, and you kind of touched on it a little bit there when talking about how trainers will get into something and all of their clients will, is because if you're passionate about something, that instills trust. For better or worse, there are people who trust people who are passionate about stuff that are wrong, that are dead wrong. That's what cults are. Cults are people who are really passionate about being cult leaders and sleeping with everyone's wife, but they're wrong and it's not good. But just to give you an idea, like, it's one thing for a trainer to get into a particular style, like calisthenics, for example. Let's just pull one rabbit out of the hat, and then all their clients. That's not bad. Like you're on the cutting edge. You have the time to learn about calisthenics training, and your clients get into it and they see that you're passionate about it. They've built a trust based off of your passion. Now, this is great. Your passion is founded in a pursuit of continued knowledge, and you get to take your people with you. And I think that's an amazing thing. So I don't necessarily look, and nor do I think you the same, when I see trainers move towards different things and their people follow them. It's like, yeah, that's the relationship. But where are they following to? They're following them to new skills. They're following them to better health, more variable movement, higher degrees of problem solving, probably a sense of community as everyone kind of shifts towards that. And I think that's great. I think passion precedes trust. I don't trust anyone to do something that's not passionate about what they're doing. Hard stop. But there's a level of discernment there of like, is this guy know what he's doing and passionate about it, or does he not know what he's doing and passionate about it? Because there's a difference. But if you're not passionate, you can be the smartest person in the world. You're not going to sell me on what you're doing if you're not passionate about the thing that you're doing. Hard. That's a fundamental thing. And the thing with trust that I find is trust seems to be transferable. Like someone trusts me as a trainer or as a coach, they're going to trust me as a clinician, right? They're going to trust me as a person, right? And so that starts with passionate. So that's like thing number one, that if you're getting at this complacent spot as a coach or a trainer, purge your clientele and maybe, and this is where my next point comes in, maybe become a client of someone else's for your own professional development. Because I think trainers, and I see this a lot, they lack either simultaneously or at different parts of their career, they lack respect and they lack empathy. They lack empathy for their client situation of being in a position to be told what to do. Right. And they lack respect because there's no one professionally that tells them what to do. So they look around at other trainers and they think, I'm a trainer, you're a trainer. What's the difference? It's like sometimes the difference is who's cutting the fucking checks. That's the difference. Right. Like, look at Kobe and Phil Jackson or whatever. Right. Like, Phil's in a tough spot, or Michael Jordan, whatever the fuck. Scotty Bowman and Steve Yzerman. It's like Yzerman was like one of the best players of all time. Scotty Bowman has to sit there, and there is an understood pecking order that you have to listen to the fucking coach. Yzerman made more money than Scotty Bowman. We'll probably see, and Scotty did well. Coach Detroit Red Wings is for my non-Canadian friends here. But anytime there's a coach relationship with a client, there's a certain level of empathy and respect that's going on, right? A good coach can be empathetic to the position that the player is in, right? And tailors their communication and their approach to understanding how that person's going to react, while simultaneously there's a respect given to the coach. If the coach is making fucking 100 times less than the player could realistically go, fuck you. And then the general manager will likely find, if the player's that good, will find another coach. But there's a balance there between respect and empathy. Empathy from the coach to the player and the situation of them being told what to do. And then there's a respect for the coach telling, and trainers lack that. Putting a trainer in an environment where, we like to curate, and again, I'll bring it back to L3, where it's like, it's me, you, Killian, Dante Martella, and Yo Murphy in a room. And like, look, the guys and girls who come through the level 3 program have been incredible. But part of it is if it's on the board, the first thing you say is a swift salute to the brow line right away. Yes, sir. Right away, sir. Yes, sir. Because there's a respect there. It's like respect the fact that this person has something to teach you, right? And by doing that, you're respecting yourself enough to know that you're in a position where there's something to learn. And I think a lot of trainers who silo themselves within this echo chamber, this stovepipe of positive reinforcement of clients on autopilot, they lose the empathy for the interaction and the growth of that client, and they lose the respect for the position and the authority that they hold. And I think those four things are a big part of where I see trainers go wrong. It's like you lose your passion for it. You're no longer able to maintain trust with your clients. You lose respect for the power you have, and you no longer have empathy for your client's situation. I think if you can keep a tab on those four, and I would go as far to call them virtues, or at least the discernment of those being virtues. You will if you move in accordance to those, the decision around should I get a coach? Should I drop my clients? Are they ready to not be coached? Should this person be coached? Any combination of you being a coach or client, or your clients being clients versus not, makes it's very easy if you can have an honest conversation about those four things.
And one more thing I'd point out that's kind of an underlying theme with that is the theme of humility, right? It's in that relationship, there's an underlying theme of humility in saying like, look, I don't know what you know. I want you to teach me what you know. And I'm here to learn that in the way that you teach it to me, right? It's because you'll see people that, and you'll get this with clients too, that think they know everything, or, maybe that trust isn't there completely. So they see something from a coach they follow on Instagram. They're like, hey, we're not doing this. Like, why am I not doing this? And you'll get pushback, and there's some sort of resistance along the way because there's a lapse in trust. So for someone to enter into a coaching relationship, it teaches them that humility that they need to be like, all right, I don't know this the way this person knows this, and I'm here to learn it in that capacity. And I've experienced this in my past too. Like that first kind of coaching relationship I had, I entered it not knowing what I didn't know. There's things that I knew I didn't know. There's things that I didn't know I didn't know. I entered that relationship with trust and humility that this person is going to teach me, and they're going to do it to the best of their ability. And I learned everything that I could from that person. And then I got to a point where the trust started to waver because I felt like there were things that they didn't know that they didn't know. And that's like the humility and understanding, you as a coach, and then you also as an athlete in that athlete coach relationship, is that if you understand that there's things that you don't know, and you approach them with curiosity, and you're open, you're empathetic about that, then that's going to be a much better look in that relationship versus if you just kind of have this blind confidence that, like, if you ever say like because this is the way I said to do it, or like this is the way that I do it because this is the way I do it. Like if you can't explain or elaborate on that, then that's a loss of trust in any situation, whether it's conscious or unconscious. Like that's a point where maybe some people will accept that for a period of time, but the further you get in that relationship, that loses its weight. Like there could be a time where that person's maybe not ready for the answer there, or maybe they can't understand, they don't have the capacity, but they will get to a point where they ask that question again. If you don't have the answer, then that's an immediate loss of trust. So both on the coaching side of things and the athlete side of things, there needs to be an air of humility that I'm going to learn everything I can, or I'm going to do what I can to continue to provide a high value service to my clients. And once I get to that point where I'm tapped out, like I need to have the humility to admit that to myself first, admit that to my clients, but also the humility to seek that out and understand there's someone out there that knows what you don't know. And if you can enter in a relationship, a coaching relationship with that person, and learn it through their eyes. Like I said, I worked with some of the people that are perceived to be some of the best Olympic weightlifting coaches in the United States. And I have respect for them for what they've done. I have the humility to recognize that, but I also have different opinions than them. And I would do things differently now, having learned from them, being coached by them. It's like, okay, I appreciate this person for what they've taught me, and they've given me a lot of growth, but they've also given me the tools to identify and create my own opinions on these things that might be different from what they taught me. And that's not a knock at them, because they've seen a lot of success in what they do, but that's just speaking towards my experience and my knowledge in the space that says, okay, I understand how this person does it. I understand it works for their population. But in my humble opinion, I think that it can be done this way, or this is a better way to approach it for you. So that underlying theme of humility, I think it pulls from all of those things. It's, yes, there's a passion involved. Yes, it takes a lot of trust on both sides to be able to have that. And the empathy, what was the last one you said?
Trust, empathy, passion, respect.
Respect. Yes, respect is a huge one, because it's, if you don't respect someone, there's no way that you're going to have the humility to kind of sit there and take it if there's a difference in opinions, right? You have to have this respect for someone that says like, hey, like, okay, maybe I don't think of it the same way, but I respect you enough to hear you out and go through the process start to finish before I object or before I start to, think that my opinion is better than yours. And that's a lot of people, like, especially on the internet, like, you can sit and you can watch, and I can see the results that these people have had, and I can pick it apart right here from this nice, comfortable chair in my office. And I could say, I would do this differently and this differently for this person. Oh, that person bombed out at the Olympics. That's a testament to your coaching and what you did and your preparation. But unless you're the one doing it, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, and that's the thing. There's a trend line between people's wantingness to be the armchair expert and people's ability to have the opportunity to be in the arena. It's like,
Yeah.
we've talked about this before, like, you have to become the person first, and then the opportunities for those people arise, right? Like, it's very easy to sit back, like you said, someone misses a snatch or someone gets hurt in a game, and we could like, oh, who's responsible for this? It's like,
Right.
dude,
Right.
if your first reaction is to point a finger at like an athlete's poor performance at a coach, you will never get, or at least not for very long, get the opportunity to work in these high risk, high reward, but high responsibility settings.
Right.
Because you need to dispense of that knee jerk reaction. I put up something the other day, and it was actually quite alarming. And I don't want to name names, but I'm going to try and get this right. No, because I do ultimately have respect for this person.
Okay.
So, I think it was a clip from the podcast. I'm trying, man. We're trying to grow here. I put up a clip from the podcast about, we were banging on about reaction and the floating head thing. And, so the crux of for those who don't follow me on Instagram, God willing, it was basically saying that like reactions are weak. Like, if you make a reaction video to something, you don't actually own your thoughts, right? Like, you're just merely an echo chamber. Like, you're bouncing off of an original source who came up with something that you disagree with. And someone put, so correcting, and I feel bad. And I even preemptively struck this because someone tagged him in it. And I was like, no, this guy's cool. Like, I like him. I don't have a beef with you. And he goes, so correcting others' bullshit and misinformation they post is something we shouldn't do. What would you suggest we do here then? Like to me, the answer
maybe try some original thought. How about that?
Like, the fact that I had backed myself into a corner, like, what do you suggest I do? I'm like, I mean, again, and I didn't respond. This is somewhat of a pseudo response, but it's not in the sense that I'm just trying to explain my just dumbfoundedness of the question, because I'm just like,
you missed it. You missed the whole message.
This is how far we've come. Like, there is no other option. And like I always say, like, an antidote to a bad idea is a better idea. Right? Like, I will go on record and say the reason that I started doing fitnessy stuff on the internet was I read an article from this guy, I forget his name, Ryan something. And he talked about why athletes should squat different. And he basically, the point was structural differences in the pelvis dictate that people should squat differently. But my gripe as an angry, heavily indebted 23-year-old was, wait a minute, like, I have a sanctity around my definition of athlete. Like, the athlete should squat respective to the task, not respective to their particular anthropometry. Like, you're making a quantum leap if you think that you can understand someone's hip socket structure. If a lineman is a lineman, we're going to predetermine that the lineman is built like a lineman and should squat like a lineman. Because if he squats like how his structure is and then plays like a lineman, we're not building strength in that relative position. There's probably minimal transfer, if any. So my big gripe was that I thought he was using the word athlete very generously. Where I think athlete, I think about pros, I think about girls who do this for a living, and it fucking irked me. And you knew me at that age, like I was an angry person. But it was a what are you gonna do about it moment, right? Like, I'm 23. I moved to California. I'm in grad school. The guy was in like Seattle. I've since done a podcast with him after. He's a lovely guy. But like, it's a part of my life where before, if I disagreed with someone, what are you going to do about it? Like, I'm going to punch him square in the mouth. But I'm like, over a squat. So my idea of punching him in the mouth was writing an article about the opposite of that. The beginning of that article is pretty much what now people know as the L1 manual. That's how it started. Spiked started this company, but it's like, I didn't at any point mention him. I was just like, okay, he penned an article of original thought where he read some research. He had and fucking respect on his name for that, right? Respect on his name for taking that and being like, I have this idea. There's a thought process around squatting. I'm going to write sort of a cogent piece about that. And he did it. And then I saw that and go, okay, I have a different thought to that. It has inspired this thought, but I never dragged him out in front of the public square, hung him and said, no, you put your faith in me. Like, I just fucking wrote a thing that was a different thing. So the fact that we're at a point where people are like, but what do you mean? What? There's no other option. It's like, shutting the fuck up. Shutting the fuck up is always an option. And honestly, if it's on the table, it's usually the one I'm going to take. Like, if I want to get home and go sleep in my bed that night, regardless of the scenario, if shutting the fuck up is on the table as an option, I'm going to take the shut the fuck up card and I'm going to dip, because then at the end of the day, it's just fitness and I have a whole life outside of this. So you guys can do what's going on over there. I'm going to go to sleep and I'm going to shut the fuck up. Like, it baffles me, dog. It's absolutely baffling. It's just being tired. At a certain point, don't you get punched out? Yeah, that's what it is. It's like, you know what it is? When you throw enough punches, you realize it just hurts yourself after a while. Like, I think about that. Like, you find yourself, you live in San Francisco. I live in Toronto. There's times where you're like, if my hand's going to hurt for a few days and training's going to suck, like, I'm just going to take the next road. What did he call me? Oh, really? Is that what he called me? Is that what he thinks? The guy with 4 teeth? Yeah, he's probably right. And I'll just keep walking. What fuck you say? And now I just think, like, because it's, like, at a certain point, you have to punch yourself out. Like, you have to punch yourself, like, not punch yourself out as knocking, but like get to the point where you're just swung out. And like, much to our conversation today, it's like the bottom line, your number one concern as someone who is looked at as a trusted professional is taking care of your people. Like, that is, to me, above all else. Whoever your people are, whether it's people you work with, whether it's, clients you coach, I think a virtue in life is service. I like some religious texts because they're really heavy on service. If anyone's ever read the Gita, which is like this interesting Indian text, it's all about service. And it's like, you find yourself in a position where people trust you to do a thing. Your sole job when you wake up is like, you're basically a shepherd in that small part of that person's life, right? And like, a shepherd isn't like an old man with a cane that just walks with a bunch of sheep. Like, shepherds keep wolves away, right? Shepherds protect their people. And then at a certain point, you can let your people go if you've done a good enough job. So like, I think there's a certain responsibility to, like, look, attention you give to inane things like that, a bit of a sidetrack, is attention that should have gone to your people, right? Like, it should be paid to the people that fuck with you. And what a privilege it is to be in a position where people fuck with you for a living. And then, so it's like, just do that thing. And that comes down to the things we talked about. It comes down to, like, are you passionate about, like, are you passionate about getting it right over being right, to paraphrase a Tim Riley quote that I really like. Have you accrued enough trust in your own abilities that is then transferred for other people? Do you have enough respect for the industry you work in, the people you work for, and fundamentally yourself, right? Do you have enough empathy to understand how the person's feeling on the other side of this interaction? If you've balanced those four things, what we do is not terribly, terribly difficult. The problem is balancing those four things is terribly difficult.
Yeah, I agree. And that speaks to the character of the person that we're talking about. That I don't know.
It blows my mind. I like him. I was actually a little bit, I had a avatar of the person behind the screen of the guy who made that comment that I was like, I still like him. I enjoy this. It's candor and it's irreverent, but an opportunity to not say anything versus taking the option to say that was okay. Again, and I might not ever meet this person in person, but it's just an interesting choice. It's not a choice I would make. Right. It's just not a choice. What are we supposed to do? It's I don't know, man, take care of your people. That's it. Take care of your people. That's what this whole thing's about. If you do that, all the other things, the trust, the humility, the respect, the passion, the empathy, the discernment, that all falls under. If you take care of your people, that's your main focus, this whole thing becomes pretty easy.
I agree.
Oh,
well,
on that note, there it is.
I think we did
all
it.
right. Did we? I mean, we did it in the sense that the episode. We did something.
Yeah. We said a lot of things.
I'll tell you what we need to do. Starting October 2nd, we've discussed this in last week's episode.
Yeah.
2 new podcasts are emerging out of the Prescript umbrella. Strength and Context with Jorge De Hoyos. I always want to say De Hoyos. I actually bought a flight for him one time and I put an A on it instead of an O.
Ooh.
It's De Hoyos.
Yeah, I think they're fighting words for the Spanish speaking.
Well, the best part, it was a flight into America and the guy didn't notice the difference. The guy was like, that looks Mexican enough.
Yeah, he got searched at the border anyway.
Yeah, right. Oh, look, the A and the O, So Jorge and Schultz, Strength and Context. So keep an eye out for them. If you don't follow Brandon Schultz and Jorge on IG, I would definitely do that. Their podcast is going to be launching early October. And then Strength and Context. So the RX radio show, formerly known as the James's show, not formally, informally known as the Macintosh Sunday show, still be on Sunday. It's just going to be on the Strength and Context channel, on the Paint the Edges channel. Yes. So Mac and Thayer Paint the Edges on Sunday. And we're going to have Strength and Context on Monday with Jorge and Schultz. And then the Wednesday episode, RX Radio, going strong on Wednesdays as per usual. So appreciate you guys hanging out. If you have any questions, comments, apparently you can ask questions on Spotify now.
Interesting. Who's going to answer those? I don't
know. I went through the other day and I just
for real?
Deleted a bunch of them. I'm going to be honest. I was that seems rude. I'm just going to not.
You decided for them to shut the fuck up.
Yeah. I shutted them up. Yeah. But if you guys want to reach out to us, YouTube comment section, search us on YouTube, RX Radio. If not, no further ado, we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, guys.